we have to get ourselves to a position of acceptance, really, that from one day to the next, we're not going to know how we feel. Maybe from 1 hour to the next, we're not going to know how we feel at the moment. But I think being okay with that and not fighting it is hugely important.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey Hatchlings, and welcome to episode 63 of the Motion Hatch podcast. Today I have Dr. Anna Symonds on the show. She is a clinical psychologist. I wanted to bring Dr. Anna on the show because there's a lot going on in the world at the time that I'm recording this podcast. We're in the middle of a pandemic and there's a lot of uncertainty. This causes us a lot of anxiety and it can be a burden on our mental health. So I wanted to bring Dr. Anna on to help us navigate through this. I think that even if you're listening to this in the future, when hopefully everything will be a bit better, that being a freelancer still has its ups and downs, so I think a lot of the things that we discuss in the podcast will still be relevant. I hope that this does help you. Let's get into it. Hey Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me, Hayley.
So do you want to tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, can do. So I am a consultant clinical psychologist. I work in Nottinghamshire privately with young people and children, but I also do adult work as well. So primarily I run Elysian Psychology, where we have associates who are also psychologists who I work alongside. And we see people with a range of conditions and issues and mental health difficulties, including anxiety, depression, OCD. And we work over Skype as well as at the therapy rooms that we've got set up in Nottingham as well.
That's great. So I wanted to bring you on the podcast because obviously there's a lot of concern out there right now with there being a global pandemic and it's pretty much affecting everyone. So I wanted to talk about, mental health and how we can better cope in these stressful times. First thing I wanted to ask you about is, do you have any tips, I guess, or anything to help people who are feeling a bit stressed? Maybe some freelancers losing some jobs and things like that. Do you have any advice for us to deal with these kind of things?
I mean, I'm also self-employed, so I feel your pain currently. I think we're all in the same boat, aren't we? But it's really important to remember that we are all in the same boat. I think if you feel like you're on your own, that's going to make it so much harder. So remembering that you're not alone, other people are feeling the same. And maybe it's a case of reaching out to some of those people. I know I certainly feel better when I reach out for the support of people that are in a similar position. It's hard to give tips really, and obviously I will, but we're in a transitional stage. So I think even if you think about where you were probably last week or where you might be next week, it's hard to know, isn't it, the trajectory of where we're going with this and how we're going to feel because the circumstances around us change so quickly. And I think really it's about trying to be flexible and adaptable, which I presume you guys are anyway with the nature of your work, as am I. We do actually have the inner resources to manage to work flexibly and to cope with the ups and downs. I guess this is just a lot more intense and also is unexpected, which can of course leave us feeling out of control as well, which raises our anxiety. And none of us like to feel out of control really. We're all control freaks to a certain extent and we like to know what's going in and what's coming out and all the rest of it, and all of that has suddenly been thrown up in the air. And I think we have to get ourselves to a position of acceptance really, that from one day to the next we're not going to know how we feel. Maybe from 1 hour to the next we're not going to know how we feel at the moment. But I think being okay with that and not fighting it is hugely important.
I like how you mentioned control. I feel like I definitely relate to that. I think I'm a bit of a control freak. And then when I'm not in control, I feel like really anxious. I'm like, oh my God, I can't that's why I think some of us run businesses because we are like a bit control freaks and we want everything to be like how we want it to be. So, and then when stuff like this happens, like you say, you sort of feel like, I can't control it. No one, I think the problem is mainly, obviously like there's terrible things going on, but for a lot of people, it's just not knowing, like, when is it going to end?
Absolutely. And we're all anxious about the unknown, aren't we? But what I would say to you is you were probably anxious about that before anyway. This isn't anything new. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of trusting that we've always lived with this really. Life is never really that certain. So it was all an illusion, I think, if we thought we had certainty. But you're right. A lot of people will be attracted to your profession because wanting to be their own boss and be in charge. And I think that loss of control can feel ever so frightening. And what we have to almost do is think, okay, so maybe I wasn't in as much control as before, but there may be elements that I still do have control over my life. So you might need to broaden it out into your general life, but what can I feel in control of? That's why people were panic buying, because it was a way of feeling in control, wasn't it? You know, if you had your toilet rolls or your milk, you felt like, okay, I can cope with this. So we're all desperately at the moment trying to grab onto bits of control. Now, I think once we shift into an acceptance mindset, and I think that will happen the further along that this goes. So the more we haven't had a lot of time, as you and I are recording this right now, to get our heads around it. The more that you have time to get your head around anything that causes you anxiety or stress, obviously the easier it becomes, and we develop natural resources to deal with it. But we naturally do get our heads around it a bit more. I think we're just a bit all over the place, to be honest, but I think that's normal. So people listening think, but I'm not sure what I feel, or these feelings are very strong. You know, it's okay. It all just needs to settle down a bit. This is part of the adapting process. We're in a transitional phase of not knowing what we're heading into. You know, we can look at what other countries are doing, but really what's happening there. But really, none of us really know. When business is dropping away and you're thinking, well, is this going to carry on, or are people going to come back? We really don't know at the moment. So the uncertainty is most certainly driving the anxiety. So what in your life can you be certain about? What can you take control over? And sometimes that's very, very small things. Like for me, I've started doing a series of videos that I put off for 2 years. It made me do that, you know, so I can feel like I'm doing something productive. Is there something productive or helpful you want to do? Are there little bits of things in your life that you can do? Might be very small changes. And I'd also say that you can get some control and feel there's some choice over your thoughts as well. You know, we can choose a mindset to a certain extent. I appreciate we're all anxious right now, but we can choose to say, this is happening. Is there a different way to look at this? I'm going to choose to try and look at this differently. I work very close with somebody who just keeps a positive mindset. I don't think she always feels it, but she projects it out there. We work very closely together and it rubs off on me. I come off the phone to her and I think, oh, this is okay. I feel more positive. So always think about the impact you're having on other people. If you maybe can't do it for yourself and feel positive for yourself, you might be able to do it for somebody else, but it will make you feel more positive. But I don't think we have to keep that all the time. I think it is okay just to sit. And if you need to cry or you need to wallow or you just need to, you know, it's almost like a grief process, really. You have to just sit with the emotions that come up. There's no running away from them. And they do say if you sit with the feeling for 90 seconds or so, that it allows you to process it. And I think you've just got to sit with it. I honestly think there's no running away from this. And if we need to accept what is happening, it's not about creating resistance. It's not saying I'm ignoring that. It's not saying, okay, this is not happening. It's about sitting with it, which is painful.
Yeah, I think that is a really good way of looking at it. What I was thinking about is because a lot of people are saying we could do some training, we can do this and that. And I think it can sound quite trivial to be like, oh, do some art, do some training, you know, up your skills. And like you were saying, you're doing some videos and stuff. But then I think I like what you're saying because you're sort of giving yourself something else to do. So you're sort of controlling that aspect, like one kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. And I think that is a way to feel in control. We can all feel helpless, can't we, in a situation like this? I think you have a choice over that, how you respond. So that will make you feel in control as well. You do have a choice to just sit and wallow all the time, or you have a chance to sit and wallow and then go, okay, what am I going to do? Now, everybody's makeup is differently and people will respond differently. I certainly am somebody who will go, right, what can I do? Maybe that's anxiety driven. So that might resonate with some people. Other people might feel less motivated. But I guess because you're all freelancers, you probably have got high levels of motivation, I'd have thought. You need to work to keep the money coming in. So I imagine if majority of you are motivated, and you know, you might find that you find some inner kind of strength from somewhere that says, right, well, I will do something differently. I will make this a positive opportunity because this will end. It will calm down. I mean, if you look at China, they're getting themselves back on their feet very slowly, but they are. When times are very hard in the present moment, we have to be in the moment, but you can project forwards as one thing. Well, how do I want to come out of this? How do I want to be personally? But how do I also want my business to look as well? What's important to me? What do I want to be able to offer that's different? We have to think outside the box, don't we, I think? And we are also used to, thoughts like to get stuck. So we get very easily stuck on our patterns of thinking. and our ways of doing things. And I think if you can see it as an opportunity to reevaluate, but with no pressure. I think if you suddenly think, I've really got to do all of this, I've got to change how I do things and I don't know how to do it, don't feel that pressure. Just let it all calm down. Just work out where you're at. Just keep yourself okay. And then you can reevaluate. There's no pressure right now. You might see people around you doing lots of different things. Brilliant. Be happy for them. Be pleased for them. You don't have to be so responsive. You can take your time and think about, okay, how am I going to make this work for me? Because you've got to create everything from a good place. If we create manically, it's not got a very nice energy to it, has it? It's got to be, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm coming from a calm, as calm as I can be kind of place right now. If you're feeling low or you're really struggling with mood, probably not the right time to be trying to push something out there, because it won't have the right feel to it, and you probably won't be very happy with it when you come out the other end. So it might just be small things behind the scenes or whatever. If you get yourself through this and you're just about okay, maybe that's enough. Everyone's going to be different. Some people will create grand things and some people will just literally hold on and get through it. So it's important to know where you're at on that spectrum, really, and not compare yourself to other people, because everybody's different and everybody's businesses are going to be slightly different as well. We all do the social comparison, don't we? But if you need to protect yourself from what other people are doing, well, just don't look. That's another way of taking control. You know, they might think, oh, I wonder what Hayley's doing. Well, if you get stressed by what Hayley is doing, well, don't look at what Hayley's doing. You know, I think, but we've got to take responsibility for that ourselves, really. You know, you could apply the same to social media. There's lots of things out there that are scary about coronavirus at the moment. Well, maybe, or on the news, maybe don't look all the time. And that could be a way of trying to elicit some kind of control over our circumstances when we feel so out of control.
You know, a few things you said there that really resonated with me, like one, not looking at the social media all the time, and two, in our industry, because we're creatives, we have imposter syndrome and we're always looking like, oh, what everyone else doing, blah, 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 you know, and there's a lot of people out there at the moment, like trying to help and creating all this stuff online and stuff like that. And I think it's really great, but then it can also make us feel a bit like, you know, I'm not really doing all that. I'm just sort of keeping it together over here.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Like
just keep it together then.
Yeah, don't have that extra like capacity to like, I don't know, make like a load of animations about it or something like that. Do you see what I mean? Like,
oh, absolutely.
And I think people would be thinking that.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it's interesting when we think about comparison, because it's almost like there's somebody, we all have this sense that there's somebody judging us or something from on high and looking at what we're doing. Well, nobody is. And actually, the truth of it is nobody's really that bothered about what you're doing. Like, let people get on with their own stuff. And really, nobody's judging you for what you're doing. And we're all so different, aren't we? Nobody can judge your situation. Maybe you've got children that you need to provide for and you've got to go down a completely different avenue. Or, I don't know, you've got a studio to maintain. Who knows? Your situation might be different to somebody who doesn't have the same level of responsibility as you. So we've got to try to avoid the social comparison. We all do it. So if you catch yourself doing it, I think it's about, with all this stuff at the moment, just coming back to yourself in your head so calmly and so kindly and kind of saying, okay, I am happy for that person, but actually where I am, it's okay. I'm kind of, either I'm healing or I'm preparing or I'm resting or whatever it is. You don't even need to legitimize it, but just, I'm okay where I am. We only get envious or jealous or into comparison when we all use other people as mirrors, don't we? So, you know, that person shows us who we are or who we are not. And really, we only get kind of jealous if we know we're capable of that. So you'll look at somebody else and kind of think, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I got the energy to do that. Like, oh, it's unfair that I can't do that. And that's probably because you know you're capable of that. So if you're capable of that, maybe that will motivate you to do something. But it doesn't have to be straight away. Let's all be kind to ourselves. Life is taking a very different trajectory and a different path at the moment. We'll all end up in a similar place, really. We kind of come off of the path a little bit, but ultimately we end up in similar places. So I think lots of kind, compassionate thoughts. If that's difficult, a lot of us are very hard on ourselves in our heads. Think what you would say to somebody in your position, or, you know, you might have somebody in your life who is kind to you or has been kind to you in the past. You can use their voice to say, look, this is okay. You're doing your best. Keep going. Everything's all right. You know, use that, create a compassionate voice in your head. It's usually important because most of our own voices in our heads, you know, our own thoughts are not usually that kind to ourselves.
It can be hard, like if stuff is going on with your life and bad things are happening. But then sometimes I think there is like a lot of that. Like, obviously there's a lot of like terrible things going on too. And everyone has their own life situation. Like we were even talking before we started recording, life is still happening.
Absolutely.
Outside the coronavirus and stuff like that. So you talked a bit in your video about when people are catastrophizing things in their life. And obviously with everything that's going on now, it can be quite difficult. And, some people have some bad things happening. But do you want to just talk a bit about when we're doing that and how we can, help ourselves to stop catastrophizing and make things a little bit better?
Well, they're thinking errors. We're supposed to call them cognitive distortions. And catastrophizing is one of those. It's where we kind of find ourselves going to the worst case scenario. We also get into magnifying, which is making a situation bigger than it is. We also get into what we call crystal ball gazing, which is trying to predict the future, which we're probably all desperate to at the moment and cling and, I need it to be like this, or it's going to go like this. We find some reassurance in that. But ultimately, these, are called thinking errors because they're not necessarily a true reflection of our reality. They're a version of our thoughts in our head. And so really when you want to change those thoughts, be aware of them. So if you catch yourself and you think, oh gosh, that's a really big thought, or you've got yourself from A to Z, without much room in the middle, but you've had a thought and before you know it, you've lost your house and all the rest of it. You lost a job, but in your head, you're like, well, that's it, I've lost my house and, all these bad things will happen. It's just being aware that your thoughts have jumped massively ahead and that maybe you're catastrophizing. And even that awareness, okay, maybe I'm magnifying this, maybe I'm making it bigger than it is, just somehow dampens that original thought and makes it less powerful, because our thoughts can be very, very powerful. But what I'd say to you is be careful not to believe your thoughts. We have about 80,000 thoughts a day. I would say about 90% of mine are a load of rubbish. It's quite normal that most of our thoughts don't make sense. Even as we're talking and people are listening, they'll have had a narrative of everything going on around them, what they're looking at, what they can see, what they're having for dinner. Like, oh, that's the nature of thoughts, that we're not in control of them. They're just all over the shop, really. And that's quite normal. When we're anxious, we'll have more of those, or the more thoughts, or the thoughts will be more chaotic, or the links between them will be difficult. And I think as long as you catch yourself doing it, that's how to not do it, basically. Kind of go, okay, I think I'm catastrophizing. You could say, right, I'm going to choose a different thought. Because when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So you could change that thought to say, okay, well, yeah, maybe I might lose my house, but actually maybe, right now in this moment, so bring yourself back to the moment, I'm in my house, this is okay. Is there anything that I can do? Is there anything I can plan to do that will make that not happen? Or do you just take it on a day-by-day basis? A lot of us are going to be in survival mode right now, in fight or flight. That's okay as well. That will eventually sort of calm down. But I think, just keeping an eye on your thoughts and consciously going, right, I'm going to choose a peaceful thought over this, even if you don't really believe it. If you consciously sort of say, right, I'm going to put in a thought of peace, you've always got to get a gap between the thoughts. We have a thought for 1.2 seconds. You've got to get in between the thought and go, okay, that was a really anxious thought. Breathe, bring it back. That wasn't helpful. What's a different way to look at this? But again, accepting thoughts is sometimes just letting them come in and just accepting that they'll go out again. We really shouldn't create resistance around our thoughts or our worries. So if you say to yourself, well, don't think about that, that's not really helpful. If I say to you, don't think about pink elephants for the next minute, you're probably all listening to thinking about pink elephants already because you're thinking about it by the fact you don't know not to think about it. So, I think we just have to be very gentle in our thoughts. Just let the thoughts come in. And then naturally, if we sit with them and we recognize the quality of them, okay, that's a thinking error, I'm catastrophizing and whatever, I'm trying to go into the future too much, it's just recognize that. And then it will naturally move itself on and then you'll feel better.
So a lot of us have our own businesses or studios, or maybe we're parents and stuff like that. So how can we deal with the feelings of being anxious around the responsibility that we might have for other people during this time?
Most people will be on some level feeling a certain level of responsibility, whether it's for yourself and your family, or it's your employees or other people that you contract work to as well. A definition I quite like of anxiety is when we hold too much responsibility. So when you're relying on your own strength too much. A lot of us have a lot of plates spinning at any one time. Sometimes we might sit and we might go, right, which ones of those can I afford to drop and which ones can't I? And sometimes we have to let some of those kind of responsibilities drop. I was talking to someone earlier who was like, he coaches his football team and he's going to do it over Skype, but he's incredibly stressed about it. And I was like, well, why are you doing that? Like, and he's like, because I want to. And I was like, well, that's very kind of you. But he was really stressed about it. And I was thinking, is this the time really? You're worried about your job? Like, I know that sounds awful. And actually, maybe that experience will make him feel more positive. productive and take his mind off it. I think we've just got to be sensible in our choices. Responsibility is a real trigger for anxiety in a lot of people. And I think we've got to remember that everyone's responsible for themselves. So if you have to lay off somebody, obviously it's not going to be a nice feeling and you wouldn't want to do it unless you really had to. But that person, again, has responsibility for themselves, and the people they work with have responsibility. So if you're holding, what I'm saying to you is, we care about other people, don't we? And I absolutely do. I'm not saying don't care. If we hold too much responsibility of other people, it's just going to become too much for us. It's going to be too difficult. I was talking to a psychologist the other day, and he was very calm, and he was like, and I could see what he was doing was putting a lot of responsibility on the government. So kind of saying, well, that they will help with the mortgages and they will do this, and there's a petition to help self-employed people and then pay 80% of wages. And I thought, okay, so we can internalize responsibility, as in like it's all me, or we can externalize it, it's everybody else's responsibility. You probably want to get somewhere in the middle. There'll be certain things you vary on, whether you internalize or externalize them. But maybe in your head going, right, well, what are my internal responsibilities? What are my external responsibilities? Who am I responsible for? But also, who's responsible for me? Because sometimes we're not on our own, but we can feel very isolated, like we're the only one going through this. Or if you're self-employed and you work on your own, like it's just you and you're holding everybody. But who is holding you? There may be some people that you can lean on, and none of us want to have to ask people for money or support, whatever it might be. But at difficult times, maybe we've not got to hold all that responsibility ourselves. Even if we thought, okay, well, there's that option there, or that might happen there, or the government might do that, or I could ask that person for this support or whatever, would make us feel much more held. Like we said earlier, if we're people that like to take control, we're self-employed, we like, to be in charge, we might struggle with that. And you might have to make yourself actively kind of seek out, okay, who can contain me? How can I reduce some of my responsibility and share it out? And some of that is going to be cognitive in your thoughts as well, and think, okay, that person's responsible there, this is mine, this belongs here, and really sort of trying to really come down to the core responsibilities that you have. But ultimately, everybody's responsible for looking after everybody else. So there'll be other people that you hopefully can rely on or talk to, even if it's just one person.
Some people hopefully have good accountants, and they should be, maybe they could help with giving you some advice around if there is any help for like from the government and stuff like that. Because I know that was something I was talking to my accountant about. So, she was saying we're looking at this, blah, 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 to see who can use the help. So it just came into my mind, and I was like, yeah, like, there's stuff that we don't think of, that there are other people around us that maybe can be of more help if we ask them.
Yeah,
and things like that.
Yeah. And even if we feel like we have the majority responsibility, if even a little bit can kind of go, like say, onto the accountant or whoever, it might feel just a little bit better, rather than just immediately thinking, I'm responsible for this studio and everybody that I work with. Just try and break it down. Sometimes with clients, I draw a pie chart and I say, right, well, who's responsible for what, and work out each little bit if you wanted to write it down and try and make sense of it in a more concrete way.
Yeah, that's cool. So if there's kind of any, if we feel like we're in like a really tough situation and things are getting quite bad, like is there anywhere we can go to get more help and advice and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's about recognizing, keeping an eye on your mental health throughout all this process. So again, we're heading into the unknown a little bit, aren't we? We don't know the impact of things fully. So I think it's your responsibility and the responsibility of people around you to keep an eye on you, for checking in on how you are. And I think if you notice any big changes in your behaviour, for example, you're really struggling to get out of bed, or your appetite changes, or, you might start to panic, anything that feels very different for you, it might be time to seek some help. So I appreciate that GP surgeries are not opening their doors, but they do phone consultations. If you're extremely worried, if you're having suicidal thoughts or you're in a really dark place, again, GP, but you could also take yourself to A&E as well. There are people like me, I offer Skype sessions. There's other people around that would do that as well. We're all still working just to put some support in place. And I appreciate people might say, well, I can't afford it or pay for that. I think a lot of people at the moment are doing reduced kind of fee work. Certainly I will be doing that, because I just feel like mental health doesn't go away. Like you were saying, other life events don't just go away. They happen whilst this is all going on. It's like, I always think we're like a cup of feelings, we can only contain so much really. And life might have been pretty full for you before all this started, or things might happen that might then go into your cup and we're going to easily get into overwhelm. So I think just keep an eye on your mental health, any massive changes, or if other people say to you, other people sometimes notice mental health changes in us before we do. So if they spot anything and they raise concerns, please do listen. please do listen. It's going to be very easy for us all, while we're self-isolating, to ruminate and overthink and getting our own heads a lot. And as you and I probably both know, that's not a good place to be. That's why we go out into the world, and we might go and sit in a cafe and work rather than kind of stuck in our spare room or whatever it might be, or, because actually we need to change our thought patterns and processes. So be responsible for your own mental health. If you're very worried, like I say, please do seek external support. You won't be on your own. Lots of people who perhaps even never struggled with their mental health before might be hit with this. This could be, by talking to people already, I'm aware that this is a big trigger for lots of things that maybe we've just pushed down or we've not thought about over the last few years of our life or however long. And suddenly everything's coming up to the surface, partly because we have time, but also because we're just so triggered. The world feels now unsafe to a lot of us, and maybe it's felt safe before and we just don't know how to respond to it. And we're all learning, just remember that. So if you go to see a counsellor or therapist or the GP, you won't be the first person that day or that week or that month that's had that conversation, but you must reach out because you need to be okay on the other side of this. So don't wait till it's over to get support. Get support in before, if you feel like you're crashing emotionally, get support in before you hit the bottom. Don't hit the bottom if you can help it.
Get it before you need it, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we do have to hit bottom to bounce back up, and we have to fall apart to pull back together in a very different way. Just keep an eye on yourself and try not to let that happen, really. And I think we will struggle to rely on other people, because we might think, well, they're going through their own difficulties and things. Just be sensible in the people that you choose. And actually, if people knew you were struggling, they'd feel awful that you hadn't gone to them. How would they feel if they thought, oh gosh, 2 months ago you were feeling really low or really anxious and you didn't reach out? They'd feel really bad. So do reach out. You know the people that are able to offer you support or who might be a bit more resilient. If we're all just honest with each other that this is going to be a really difficult time, we'll all just feel better because we're all in it together, aren't we? So don't feel like you're on your own or that you're in a different position to somebody else, especially within your profession. There's going to be lots of people feeling a similar way. I'm certain of it.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a lot of people on like our Facebook community and stuff like that, and in our mastermind and everywhere, kind of talking about, how they're worried about stuff and things like that. And I just think it's nice to just reach out to people and like have more conversations. And I'm definitely trying to facilitate more conversations around this and people, maybe feeling a bit more anxious and stuff. And that's why I'm talking to you, and hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think some people might not be very public people and might not want to post it on a group. So, just reach out to your friend, if it's just one friend, if you're really struggling. It doesn't have to be in such a public way. But I think when times are really difficult in the current moment, it's okay to project forwards. And there is some value in visualizing and keeping our thoughts positive. I was thinking about this the other day, really. I was thinking, am I kind of almost manifesting? Am I talking myself into bad things happening? Because then it becomes certain, doesn't it? When we feel, okay, but how's this going to survive or this going to work? You then get stuck on that as a thought path. And actually, I think it's really important that we go, okay, but what's the alternative to that? Just being aware that we don't know, because this is the unknown, like we said. Don't take yourself too far down a path. Maybe visualize how you would like things to go, like the best case scenario for this set of circumstances. Imagine keeping those jobs, imagine those projects coming in, and capture the feeling of what that would feel like for those things to keep coming in. And whether they do or not, we don't know, but at least it will keep your thoughts positive, and you're putting out a kind of positive energy when people might talk to you. You might be attracting more work in than if you're kind of thinking, well, I'd just give up then.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Like, I heard someone say this morning who's like part of a group that I'm in, talking about how like I'm open to opportunities, I'm still open to things. And that kind of idea, I think, is good. And like a lot of people are asking me, like, should I still be reaching out to clients and that kind of stuff? And, as well as being open, I think just trying to be helpful, and we can be helpful in so many ways, like people who can, help kind of broadcast messages, I guess, in like efficient and like very beautiful ways. We should be thinking like, how can we use our skills to help, and whether that's paid work or free, or it's just an interesting time to think about these kind of things.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's good to be pushed to think outside the box, isn't it? I think we do have to think, how do you want to come out of this? And, you could almost reflect back on that as if we were coming out of it, but yes, you might want to look back and say, yeah, I'm really pleased that I offered that free work, or I supported this person, or whatever it might be, because ultimately, even if you're doing work for free, it'll still make you feel really good. It'll still make you think, okay, well, I put myself out there so that when things do repair, that you've done something that you think is useful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like, maybe not always doing like free work and stuff like that.
No,
I'm always very
not
careful about that.
Yeah.
It's just like, just being open to opportunities and thinking about, is there a way that you can do something that will be like a little bit, like we're saying, sort of, it's hard, isn't it? Because not like, it's almost like not how you can turn it into a positive, but just how you can kind of feel like bringing some of that control back and all of this kind of stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure, I'm not creative in any way, but I'm sure I'm musical, not creative. But, I'm sure when you produce a piece of work, I hope you will look at it and think, yeah, that was pretty good, actually, well, that was really good. So even if you were having to put things out, I don't know, at a reduced cost or free or whatever it might be, that you could then look at that and feel proud of that work, and that will boost you to keep going. It might be important in that sense as well. When we're grown-ups, nobody says well done to us, do they, really, very often? We sort of have to do it in our own heads, but I think it's good for us to feel good about what we're doing. Again, we'll create a really nice energy about it, and we'll be putting that out, and people will respond to that and pick up on it. But again, if you're really struggling to do that, I think it's okay just to keep your head down and get through the next few weeks or months if that's what you need to do. And again, protecting yourself so you're not doing this kind of comparison. And you might find that you want to do things as, the light will be at the end of the tunnel. We can't see it yet, but as that light gets bigger, you might find the motivation to carry on. So if you're struggling now, doesn't mean you will always struggle, doesn't mean it will always feel this hard. As the light kind of comes back, you might find your light comes back as well. So don't worry about yourself too much. But like I said, just take some responsibility for checking in on yourself, making sure you're okay.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, it's kind of makes me look at, my business like closer, with like a closer lens, and all that is kind of terrifying in some ways, because you're like, oh no, this is wrong and that's wrong and blah, blah, like nothing's ever perfect, is it? But in a way, it makes you kind of reevaluate, am I doing this bit in the right way? Am I doing that bit? And like, sometimes that can be good. And
yeah, of course. And I think
some days I don't feel like that. Obviously, some days I'm just like, oh my God, what's happening? Everything's going crazy. But sometimes I kind of feel like I keep getting glimpses of that. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is sort of can be something that's helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of us have just got so caught on the treadmill, on the hamster wheel, haven't we, of carrying on and doing, maybe for you guys it's the same jobs, and actually thinking, well, this isn't very rewarding, I don't like this. There might be a chance to restructure things and do things differently, because we were all so much on the grind that we haven't really had chance to reflect, is this what I want to be doing? Is this how I want to run the business, like you say? So it probably will give us time to do that, and also to plan how we want to move forwards on a personal level. So do I want to be doing this sort of work? Do I want to be editing this bit, or do I need to be giving this to somebody else, or however it works? I think it's a chance for evaluation, because we will have time, as well as investing in our personal relationships as well, which sometimes get neglected when we're self-employed, because sometimes we grab the work, don't we? And I think we've got to be careful in this, not to just grab anything, or, if we get into that mentality, there's not enough, then the mentality is there's not enough. I think we've got to be really mindful of that at the moment, and not kind of be desperate or undersell ourselves if we don't think that fits and that doesn't feel right.
I started to see people talking about that, like you're saying, like, oh my God, there's not going to be enough work, so do we all have to lower our prices and all of this kind of mindset? But then it's like, well, if everyone does that, then that's what's going to happen. But if we don't have that mindset, then it won't happen. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's like, if everyone starts doing that, then that's what will happen. But if we don't, and we're like, well, no, we're still making things of value and stuff like that, I think that's a good mindset to have.
Yeah, absolutely, because you're all in it together as a profession, aren't you? That's the thing. So really, you've all got to just stick it out, I guess, unless somebody turns around and goes, right, I'm offering this really cheap, and then everyone else might think, oh my gosh, I've got to do that now. But really, and we've got to be careful not to get into this every man for themselves mentality as well. I think it's quite easy when we panic, like the toilet roll situation. It's like not thinking about other people not having toilet roll, it's making sure I've got 50 or whatever. So, we've got to be careful. Just, it's okay it's like anything, if you catch yourself thinking that and you're thinking, well, I want to sell this or I want to do this, it's okay to have that, because we're human beings, like you said before, we're not perfect, and we're animals, we're selfish. So I think it's important to step back. Just if you have the thought, it's okay, just be kind to yourself again about the thought and pull back and go, okay, that's not what I'm going to do. That was just a thought that popped in. That's one of those, percentage of thoughts that was not worth listening to. And actually, we are all in this together, and that's not going to help anybody, including me, really, because I'm devaluing my services, and I'm not going to feel good about myself if I do that. So it's okay to step back. I would just say, don't make decisions very quickly. Sleep on any decision, especially if it's something financial. It's okay to, anything we do again with this manic energy or that's very quick might not be the right decision for us in a week's time. So don't do anything drastic just because we're in panic and we're in fight or flight mode a little bit. Don't do anything reactive. Just think, okay, I'll talk that through with somebody, or I'll sleep on that for a day or another day. Just don't do anything too reactive right now. We have time. We're going to have lots more time. So don't do anything. You don't need to respond very quickly.
I think that's good advice. So if the audience are interested in finding out a bit more about you and what you do, where can they go?
I am on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. If you look for Dr. Anna Symonds, it's Symonds, you will find me. And also for the YouTube channel as well that I've recently set up. I'm hoping to, part of my response to not feeling helpless and to try and motivate myself and other people is to put out some kind of lots of free content that should support people. So do come over and check that out if you found any of this helpful. I'll be expanding on all the issues we've talked about across the various domains. So come and join me there.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. Everyone will be able to find all the links in the show notes and stuff as usual, but I really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hayley. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Dr. Anna for coming on the show and spending time with us. I think that this is a really important topic. If you think that this will help someone else that you know, please do share it with them. I hope it has helped you too. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. Thanks again for listening. See ya.